There is a scene in the 146th episode of South Park where a man who trains dogs walks into a suburban home and treats a 10-year-old boy exactly the way he would treat a misbehaving pit bull. The man is Caesar Milan. The boy is Eric Cartman, and it works. Cartman sits, Cartman stays. Cartman, for the first and perhaps only time in his life, does what he is told without screaming, without manipulating, without threatening violence. His mother watches from the doorway, tears running down her face. She is not crying because her son is being humiliated. She is crying because someone finally helped. Eric Cartman has been punished more creatively than any character in television history. That claim requires evidence. It requires a pattern. It requires the kind of documentation that only 25 years of continuous storytelling can provide. South Park premiered on August 13, 1997, and in the decades since, its creators, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, have constructed an elaborate ecosystem of consequence around their most infamous creation. That is nearly 3 decades of continuous storytelling focused on a single ensemble of characters in a single small town. Nearly 3 decades of returning to the same themes, the same dynamics, the same central question about what happens when a person of extraordinary selfishness is embedded in a community of ordinary people. Cartman lies, cheats, manipulates, and destroys. And then, with a regularity that borders on cosmic law, the universe pushes back. If you have ever watched this show and thought that Cartman gets away with everything, you have not been paying close enough attention. If this is the kind of content that helps you wind down at night, consider subscribing. It is free, and it genuinely helps these videos reach more people who need them. But back to the matter at hand. What follows is an examination of 10 specific moments across 14 seasons and 1 streaming special, where the show delivered karma to Eric Cartman in ways that were not just satisfying, but structurally perfect. Each punishment mirrors the crime. Each consequence reflects the character flaw that caused it. This is not random suffering. This is a show that understands fundamentally and intuitively that narrative justice must be proportional and poetic to be satisfying. A generic punishment teaches nothing. A random consequence illuminates nothing, but a consequence that could only have resulted from the specific crime that preceded it, a punishment that wears the exact face of the transgression that summoned it, that is something that lands in the viewer's body rather than just their mind. The writers of South Park have spent a quarter-century building a machine that converts Cartman's cruelty into his own destruction, and the engineering of that machine deserves careful study. The patterns are not hidden. They are not subtle. They are stated plainly in the architecture of each episode, in the precise matching of crime to consequence, in the way the writers select punishments that mirror transgressions with almost mathematical fidelity. What makes them remarkable is not their subtlety, but their consistency. Over hundreds of episodes across decades of real time, through multiple changes in the cultural landscape and the show's own evolving relationship to its characters and its audience, the karma machine has never broken. It has never missed. It has never given Cartman a consequence that did not precisely fit the crime. And it has never, not once in 25 years, given him a consequence from which he learned anything. The machine is perfect. Its student is impervious. And the gap between the perfection of the teaching and the imperviousness of the student is the engine that drives the entire narrative forward. So settle in, this will take a while, and if you happen to drift off along the way, the story will still be here when you come back. Before beginning the examination proper, it is worth establishing what makes Cartman's karma different from the simple punishment of a villain. In most television programs, villains are punished by the narrative in straightforward ways. They are caught by police, they are defeated by heroes, they face the legal or social consequences that society imposes on people who break rules. Their punishment is external and institutional. It comes from outside them and is applied to them by systems designed to contain bad behavior. Cartman rarely faces this kind of punishment. His teachers do not effectively discipline him. His mother cannot control him. The legal system of South Park barely functions. There is no external institution capable of containing him. Instead, Cartman is punished by something more fundamental. He is punished by the internal logic of his own behavior. His crimes contain their own sentences. His schemes carry their own destruction embedded within them, like a ticking mechanism that will detonate at exactly the moment his plan appears to be succeeding. This is not coincidence. This is design. The writers of this show understand something about narrative karma that many other writers do not, that the most satisfying punishment is not imposed from outside, but generated from within, that the best karma is the karma that could not have existed without the specific crime that precedes it. Each of the 10 moments examined here follows this principle. The punishment is not separate from the crime. The punishment is the crime, reflected back at the criminal, wearing a different costume but carrying the same weight. The first of these moments arrives in the show's 5th season. in an episode that aired on July 25th, 2001. The episode is called Cartman Land, and it is the 71st episode of the series overall. It begins with a funeral. Cartman's grandmother has died. She was old and she was kind, and for reasons the episode never fully explains, she loved her grandson despite everything he is. In her will, she left him $1 million. $1 million to a 9-year-old boy in a small Colorado mountain town. The other boys receive nothing. Kyle receives nothing. Kenny, who would die again before the episode concludes, receives nothing. But Cartman receives $1 million, and he knows immediately and with absolute certainty what he wants to do with it. He buys an amusement park. The park is called North Park Funland, and it is struggling financially, which means Cartman can afford it. He walks in with his $1 million and he purchases the entire operation, rides and all, and he renames it Cartman Land. The name is not incidental. It tells you everything about what this purchase means to him. This is not an investment. This is not a business venture. This is the construction of a private universe, a world with his name on it, a world from which every other human being has been deliberately and systematically excluded. His reasons for buying the park are stated explicitly and without shame. He wants to ride every ride alone. No lines, no waiting, no screaming children running in front of him, no teenagers making out on the Ferris wheel, no parents pushing strollers through his path. He wants the pure, undiluted experience of having an entire amusement park to himself. Every roller coaster running just for him. Every cotton candy machine spinning just for him. Every game, every attraction, every square foot of the property existing solely for his personal enjoyment. Other human beings are, in his formulation, the only thing preventing amusement parks from being perfect. Remove the humans, and paradise is achieved. He films a commercial. The commercial advertises Cartman Land to the viewing public specifically to ensure they know what they cannot have. The commercial is a masterpiece of deliberate provocation. But not in the way commercials normally work. This commercial is designed to repel. Come to Cartman Land, it says, except you are not allowed. Only Cartman is allowed. The commercial shows him riding rides alone, eating food alone, enjoying the park in total solitude. And the entire point of broadcasting this information is not to attract customers, but to make other people aware of what they cannot have. The cruelty is the product. He is not selling admission. He is selling exclusion. He wants people to know that they are shut out. Their awareness of being denied enhances his pleasure in what he possesses. The karma begins with a problem Cartman did not anticipate, because Cartman does not anticipate problems that require understanding how systems work. A ride breaks down. Mechanical things break. This is inevitable. This is the nature of machinery. But Cartman did not plan for it because planning would require acknowledging that the world has needs that extend beyond his desires. He needs a repair person. The repair person wants something in return. Specifically, the repair person wants admission to the park for his family. Cartman resists. He argues. He protests. But the ride is broken and he cannot fix it himself, and eventually he relents. One family admitted the crack in the wall. Then security. People keep trying to sneak into the park. Of course they do. A park that advertises its own exclusivity is a park that generates intense desire to get inside. He needs a security guard. The security guard wants admission for his family. 2 families. Then maintenance for other rides. 3 families. The mathematics compound with the relentless logic of exponential growth. Each employee requires compensation. Each compensation includes admission. Each admission includes family members and friends. The park fills. The lines form. The screaming children return. The teenagers resume making out on the Ferris wheel. Everything Cartman spent $1 million to escape has reassembled itself inside his private paradise, because the things he was trying to escape are not incidental to how amusement parks function. They are fundamental to how amusement parks function. You cannot have a park without people any more than you can have a lake without water. The Internal Revenue Service arrives. Cartman did not pay taxes on his income. He did not pay business taxes on his commercial enterprise. He did not file anything because filing things requires acknowledging that the government exists and that its rules apply to him. The IRS does not care about his philosophy of radical individualism. The IRS bills him for what he owes. He cannot pay. He is forced to sell the park back to its original owner for a price far below what he paid. His final financial position is worse than zero. He started with $1 million. He ends in debt. The trajectory from fortune to ruin takes approximately the same amount of time it takes the Earth to rotate once on its axis. 1 day of ownership. 1 day of paradise. And then nothing. The parallel story of Kyle Broflovsky provides the episode with its deeper structure and its emotional resonance. Kyle, upon learning that Cartman inherited $1 million, experiences a genuine crisis of faith. The logic is straightforward and internally consistent. If God exists, and God is just, then God would not reward Eric Cartman. Eric Cartman is the worst person Kyle knows. Eric Cartman has been cruel and selfish and destructive for as long as Kyle has known him. And yet, Eric Cartman has just received $1 million from the universe for no reason other than a genetic connection to a dead woman. This is not how justice works. This is not how a moral universe is supposed to operate. Kyle concludes that the universe is not moral. Kyle concludes that God does not exist. This is not a superficial crisis played for laughs. The episode takes Kyle's suffering seriously. It presents his doubt as genuine and his pain as real. The hemorrhoid is not just a crude joke, though it functions as one on the surface level. It is a physical symbol. It is his body manifesting the spiritual agony of living in a world where goodness goes unrewarded and wickedness goes unpunished. He is lying in a hospital bed, a child, in genuine physical pain because the universe handed $1 million to the person who deserves it least. His parents are worried. His doctors are concerned. The situation has real weight within the world of the episode. It matters. This crisis manifests physically. Kyle develops a hemorrhoid. The hemorrhoid is real. It is painful. It is severe enough to require hospitalization. His body is expressing through a specific and humiliating form of suffering, the spiritual agony of watching the wicked prosper. His mother visits him in the hospital and reads to him from the book of Job. She tells him the story of a righteous man who lost everything and questioned God, and was told that God's plan exceeds human comprehension. Kyle is not comforted. He does not find solace in being told that suffering serves a purpose he cannot understand. He is a child. He wants evidence. He wants proof that fairness exists. And then he gets it. From his hospital bed, Kyle watches a news report about Cartman Land. He watches the park being seized by the IRS. He watches Cartman being dragged away from his property by men in suits. He watches Cartman weep and rage and thrash against a consequence he cannot talk his way out of. And Kyle's hemorrhoid vanishes, instantly, painlessly, as though it was never there. His faith is restored, not by theology, not by prayer, not by the comforting words of his mother or the ancient wisdom of religious texts, by watching Eric Cartman suffer. The universe does punish the wicked. The universe is just. You simply have to wait long enough to see it happen. The structural beauty of Kyle's arc in this episode deserves recognition. His faith is broken by evidence. His faith is restored by evidence. He does not return to belief through willful ignorance or through accepting comfortable platitudes. He returns because the universe provides him with exactly the evidence he demanded. He asked for proof that karma exists. The universe gave him Cartman losing everything. He asked for proof that wickedness is eventually punished. The universe showed him the IRS seizing an amusement park from a weeping child. His empiricism is rewarded by the narrative. His insistence on evidence rather than faith is validated by the arrival of evidence. The episode manages to be simultaneously about faith and about the superiority of evidence-based reasoning, which is a contradiction most stories would not attempt to hold. What this episode establishes, what it contributes to the larger architecture of the series, is a template for understanding how Cartman's karma functions. The punishment is not imposed by an external authority. No parent or teacher or police officer corrects his behavior. The correction is organic. It grows from the crime itself the way a weed grows from its own root. Cartman's sin is selfishness, and selfishness is economically unsustainable. You cannot operate a business alone. You cannot maintain property alone. You cannot exist in a capitalist economy alone. The world requires other people. Cooperation is not a moral choice. Cooperation is a structural necessity. Cartman's philosophy of radical selfishness was not defeated by a better philosophy. It was defeated by accounting. By mathematics, by the simple, irrefutable reality that one person cannot do everything, and isolation has costs that accumulate faster than any fortune can cover. The production timing of this episode within the broader season deserves one additional observation. Cartman Land aired as the 6th episode of Season 5. The season would go on to include 12 more episodes, and in several of them, Cartman's behavior is noticeably more restrained than in the episodes immediately preceding the season. This may be coincidence. It may be the natural variation of a writer's room working on multiple stories simultaneously. But it is also possible that Parker and Stone understood intuitively that having demonstrated karma so thoroughly in Cartman Land, they needed to let that demonstration breathe. They needed to give the audience time to absorb the lesson before delivering the next one. The pacing of karma matters as much as its content. A punishment that arrives too quickly after the previous one loses its impact. A punishment that arrives at the right interval, after the audience has had time to forget and then remember, lands with its full intended weight. There is also something to be said about what this episode teaches about the relationship between wealth and happiness in Cartman's specific psychology. He equates money with freedom. Freedom for him means freedom from other people. And freedom from other people, as the episode demonstrates with merciless clarity, is not actually freedom. It is a different kind of imprisonment. The isolation he purchased was not liberating. It was confining. It reduced his world to a single person in a single place with no one to talk to, no one to impress, no one to dominate, no one to compete with. Paradise, for Cartman, turned out to be unbearably boring within hours. He needed the people he was trying to escape, because without them, he had no audience for his superiority. What good is being better than everyone if there is no everyone to be better than? The episode understands this contradiction and exploits it with structural precision. The second came less than 3 years later in the 8th season, in an episode that aired on April 14th, 2004. The episode is called Awesome, and its premise is deceptively simple in a way that conceals the complexity of the trap it constructs. Cartman disguises himself as a robot. He wraps himself in cardboard boxes painted silver. He speaks in a flat, effectless monotone. He moves with deliberate mechanical stiffness. And he presents himself to Butters Stotch as a Japanese robot companion called AWESOMO 4000, manufactured and shipped from across the Pacific for the exclusive purpose of being Butters' personal assistant and friend. His goal is espionage. Unambiguous, straightforward espionage. He wants to infiltrate Butters' life, gain his trust, and extract personal secrets that can be weaponized later for humiliation and social control. This is a pattern so deeply embedded in Cartman's behavior that it barely requires explanation at this point in the series. He invests extraordinary effort into elaborate deceptions designed to exploit people who trust him. The effort never strikes him as disproportionate because the payoff, the accumulation of leverage over another human being, always feels worth any cost. Information is power. Power is purpose. Purpose is the only thing that makes Cartman feel alive. The specifics of the Awesome O disguise are worth describing because they illustrate the length to which Cartman will go when he believes a scheme is worth the investment. He has covered himself entirely in cardboard boxes. His head is in a box. His arms are in box tubes. His legs are encased. He has painted the entire construction silver and drawn rudimentary buttons and displays on the front panel. He has practiced a robot voice. He has rehearsed mechanical movements. The costume is uncomfortable, restrictive, and would be obviously fake to any adult who looked at it for more than 3 seconds. But he is not trying to fool adults. He is trying to fool Butters. And Butters, as established, does not require much fooling because Butters does not operate from a position of suspicion. Butters believes the robot is real. This fact is sometimes presented as evidence that Butters is foolish, but that reading misses what actually makes the scene work. Butters believes because Butters trusts. He lives in a world where he expects kindness from others, where he assumes that things presented to him in good faith are what they appear to be. This is not stupidity. This is the fundamental orientation of a child who has not yet been made cynical by the world's cruelty. Butters extends to Awesome the same warmth and openness he extends to everyone, because that warmth and openness is not a strategic choice for Butters. It is simply how he moves through the world. He confides in the robot. He shares his fears about being lonely. He talks about what it feels like to be the kid nobody picks for their team, the kid whose parents ground him for things that are not his fault, the kid who wants so desperately to belong and keeps finding that belonging has a cost he cannot quite afford. The irony is that Butters is telling these things to the person most responsible for his loneliness and exclusion. Cartman is inside the robot. Cartman is the one who has excluded Butters from games and activities. Cartman is the one who has mocked him and manipulated him and used him as a disposable tool in dozens of previous schemes. And now Cartman is listening to Butters describe the pain that those schemes have caused and feeling nothing about it, because the information is being stored rather than processed. Cartman does not hear Butters' pain as something that should generate guilt. He hears it as data, as ammunition, as future leverage. But Butters holds something too. And what Butters holds is the mechanism through which the entire scheme collapses. Butters possesses a videotape. On this videotape is a recording of Eric Cartman dressed as Britney Spears, wearing a costume, performing a dance routine, and making out with a cardboard cutout of Justin Timberlake. The existence of this tape is not new information within the world of the show. Butters mentions it casually, the way anyone might mention possessing an amusing recording of a friend doing something embarrassing. He does not wield it as a weapon. He does not threaten Cartman with it. He simply has it. Cartman, trapped inside the robot suit, hears about the tape and realizes the catastrophe that is about to unfold. He cannot break character. If he reveals himself as Cartman rather than Awesome O, the entire espionage operation is exposed. But if he stays in character, he cannot demand that Butters destroy the tape, cannot threaten him into silence, cannot use any of the tools that would normally be available to him for suppressing damaging information. He is trapped by his own deception. The disguise that was meant to give him power has become a cage. The cardboard walls of the robot suit are the walls of a cell he built for himself and locked from the inside. The episode escalates from there in ways that pile additional consequences on top of the original trap. Cartman, still in costume, is shipped to Hollywood by Butters' parents, who believe they are sending their son's robot to the company that manufactured it. In Hollywood, studio executives discover that ASOMO seems capable of generating movie ideas, which is to say, Cartman is forced to pitch thousands of terrible movie concepts to avoid being thrown away. The military becomes involved, believing they have encountered genuine artificial intelligence. The absurdity compounds, and at every stage, the compounding occurs because Cartman cannot abandon the lie. Each new problem is solved by a deeper commitment to the deception, which generates a larger problem, which requires an even deeper commitment. He is spiraling into the consequences of his own fraud with no exit available that does not require admitting what he did. When the truth finally emerges, Butters plays the Britney Spears tape for the town, not out of cruelty, not as calculated revenge. Butters does it because the moment calls for it, because the reveal of Cartman's deception creates a context in which the tape becomes relevant, and because Butters does not think about information the way Cartman thinks about information. For Cartman, every piece of knowledge is a weapon to be deployed strategically. For Butters, a funny tape is just a funny tape that people might enjoy seeing. The entire town watches Cartman in a Britney Spears costume making out with cardboard. The secret that Cartman was trying to steal is replaced by the exposure of a secret he would have paid any amount to keep hidden. He entered the scheme seeking to exploit someone else's vulnerability, and he exits with his own vulnerability projected on a screen for public consumption. The structural principle at work here repeats across Cartman's karma moments with remarkable consistency. The weapon turns in his hand. The tool he selects for his scheme becomes the instrument of his punishment. The disguise gives him access but takes away his ability to defend himself. The cardboard that was supposed to make him invisible makes him helpless instead. He could have done anything as Cartman. He could have threatened Butters directly. He could have stolen the tape. He could have destroyed it. But he cannot do any of those things as Awesome O, because Awesome O does not know the tape is dangerous. Awesome O is a robot, and robots do not have personal vendettas about videotapes of themselves in Britney Spears costumes. Every advantage the disguise provides is precisely counterbalanced by a restriction that neutralizes it. The scheme is perfectly self-defeating. There is an additional dimension to this episode that becomes apparent only when you consider it in the context of Cartman's larger pattern. The Awesome O scheme is not his first disguise. He has impersonated police officers. He has dressed as other people. He has adopted personas for various schemes throughout the series. But this is the disguise that traps him most completely, because it is the disguise that requires the most sustained commitment. A brief impersonation can be abandoned when things go wrong. You take off the hat, you drop the voice, you walk away. But Awesome O requires days of continuous performance, days of sleeping in cardboard, days of restricted movement and limited food, and the physical discomfort of maintaining a character that your body was not designed to maintain for extended periods. By the time the trap springs, Cartman has invested so much suffering into the disguise that abandoning it feels like an admission that all that suffering was wasted. He has committed the sunk cost fallacy in physical form. He has poured so much pain into the scheme that he cannot bring himself to waste the pain by quitting, even though continuing guarantees more pain. The scheme has become self-reinforcing through accumulated investment. Each day he maintains it makes the next day harder to abandon. Butters himself emerges from this episode as something the show rarely allows a character to be: an agent of karma who operates through pure innocence rather than through strategy or malice. He does not plan Cartman's downfall. He does not engineer it. He simply exists as himself, honest and kind, and possessed of a piece of information that Cartman desperately needs to suppress. The tape exists. Butters has it. These two facts are sufficient to destroy Cartman's reputation, and the only thing keeping them from doing so is the thin cardboard wall of a disguise that is already cracking under its own weight. There is a lesson here about the fragility of deception when confronted with simple honesty. Lies are complex. They require maintenance, they develop dependencies and contradictions and internal pressures that increase over time. Truth is simple. It requires nothing. It just waits. The third instance arrives in that same 8th season but aired 3 weeks earlier on March 24th, 2004. The episode is called Up the Down Steroid, and its central premise is designed to generate discomfort, which is always a signal in South Park that the discomfort serves a larger structural purpose. Cartman decides to enter the Special Olympics while pretending to have a disability. His reasoning is a masterwork of flawed logic built on a foundation of contempt. Disabled athletes are inferior. This is his starting assumption, not his conclusion after research, not his hypothesis to be tested. His assumption, the bedrock upon which the entire plan rests. If disabled athletes are inherently inferior, then an able-bodied person competing against them is guaranteed to win. And if winning is guaranteed, then the prize money is effectively free. It is sitting on a table waiting for someone clever enough to walk over and pick it up. He does not train. This detail matters enormously. A person who genuinely believed they were about to enter an athletic competition, even when they expected to win easily, might do some basic preparation, a few stretches, a practice run, something. Cartman does nothing. He does not prepare his body in any way because preparation would imply that effort might be necessary. And the entire point of his scheme is to obtain reward without effort. Preparation would undermine the philosophical foundation of the plan. He is not just lazy, he is ideologically opposed to the concept of earning what he receives. The Special Olympics, in his framework, is not a competition. It is a withdrawal from an ATM that has been left unattended. His disguise is offensive in ways that compound upon themselves. He puts himself in a wheelchair he does not need. He contorts his face into expressions he associates with disability. He slurs his speech. He performs a caricature so grotesque and so detached from the reality of actual disabled people that it would be immediately recognizable as fraudulent to anyone who has spent more than 30 seconds around a person with an actual disability. But the officials at the Special Olympics do not call him out. They do not pull him aside. They do not question the sudden appearance of a contestant they have never seen before whose symptoms match no known condition. They simply register him and let him compete. The results are comprehensive. He enters every event, the running events, the jumping events, the throwing events. Everything available to him, he signs up for. And in every single event, without exception, he finishes last. Not near the bottom, not in the lower half, dead last, the absolute final position. The other athletes, every single one of them, outperform him. They run faster, they jump higher, they throw farther, they demonstrate skill, technique, conditioning, and competitive drive that Cartman's untrained, unexercised body cannot match even slightly. He is not close in any event. He is not almost competitive. He is last by margins that are visible to spectators without the need for electronic timing. The episode allows this to speak for itself. There is no character who steps forward to deliver a speech about why what Cartman did is wrong. There is no authority figure who explained the dignity of Special Olympics athletes or the dedication they bring to their training. The explanation is in the results. It is in the numbers posted on the scoreboard. It is in the distance between Cartman's performance and the performance of every other athlete in every event. The math is the moral. The scoreboard is the sermon. You do not need to argue that disabled athletes deserve respect when you can simply demonstrate that they are better than Eric Cartman at literally everything physical. What Cartman assumed, the axiom on which his plan was built, was that disability equals inability. He believed that having a disability means being worse at everything, universally, without qualification. He conflated a specific physical or cognitive difference with a total deficit of capability. And the episode destroys this assumption not through argument, but through empirical testing. It puts the hypothesis in a laboratory. The laboratory is a sports field. The experiment runs to completion. The data comes back. The hypothesis is wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not wrong at the margins. Completely and devastatingly wrong. Wrong in every event, wrong in every metric, wrong without a single data point supporting it. If this were an actual scientific experiment, the conclusion would be so clear that no further study would be needed. The hypothesis that able-bodied people automatically outperform disabled athletes has been falsified with a completeness that leaves no room for appeal or reinterpretation. The control group, the disabled athletes, outperform the test subject, Cartman, in every single trial. The result is unambiguous. The disabled athletes are not just slightly better than Cartman, they are in a different category entirely. They are trained competitors facing an untrained novice, and the result is exactly what it would be in any context where a trained person faces an untrained one. The disability is irrelevant to the outcome. The training is everything. There is something almost scientifically satisfying about the precision of this karma. Cartman held a belief about the world. That belief was testable. He tested it. The test returned a clear, unambiguous result. The result contradicted his belief completely. In a rational person, this would trigger reevaluation. A rational person would update their model of reality based on new evidence. But Cartman is not rational, and part of his punishment is that he does not update. He does not learn. He walks away from the Special Olympics having finished dead last in every event. And he does not, even for a moment, reconsider his beliefs about disability and ability. The evidence bounced off him. The data did not register. He remains as certain of the inferiority of disabled people after being beaten by them as he was before. And this refusal to learn from evidence guarantees that he will continue to suffer consequences for beliefs that evidence has already disproven. The loop continues. The pattern holds. There is one more dimension to this episode that deserves attention before continuing forward. The other athletes at the Special Olympics are not presented as objects of pity. They are not presented as inspiring overcomers or noble sufferers or any of the other patronizing frameworks that popular culture often applies to disabled athletes. They are presented simply as athletes who are better than Cartman at sports. Their disabilities are mentioned but not dwelt upon. Their achievements are presented as achievements, full stop, without the qualifier of in spite of their disabilities attached. The show treats them as competitors and nothing more, which is itself a form of respect that much media fails to extend. They do not need Cartman to validate them. They do not need his failure to elevate their success. They were going to succeed whether he showed up or not. His presence at the Special Olympics does not change their experience at all. It only changes his. His physical condition also deserves attention as a factor in his failure. Cartman is overweight. Cartman has spent years consuming junk food and avoiding physical exertion of any kind. His body is not the body of someone who could compete in any athletic event, disabled or otherwise. Years of inactivity have left him soft and slow and utterly without stamina. He becomes winded quickly. His coordination is poor. His muscles lack the development that even basic recreational exercise would provide. He is, by any objective physical measurement, less fit than most children his age, disabled or not. The Special Olympics athletes, by contrast, have trained. They have practiced their events. They have built their bodies into instruments capable of performing specific tasks at a high level. The comparison is not between disability and ability. It is between preparation and laziness. And laziness loses against any opponent who has bothered to prepare. He confused the absence of a disability with the presence of fitness, which is a confusion that reveals something fundamental about how he categorizes the world. In his mind, people are sorted into binary categories: broken and not broken, disabled and able, inferior and superior. He does not recognize gradients within those categories. He does not understand that an able body can be less capable than a disabled one if the able body has been neglected and the disabled one has been cultivated. He sees only the category label, never the individual performance. And the scoreboard, indifferent to category labels, measures only performance. The episode also functions as a commentary on a specific type of arrogance that extends far beyond Cartman and far beyond the world of South Park. It is a commentary on the assumption that identity confers ability, that belonging to a category automatically grants you the qualities associated with that category. Cartman believed that being able-bodied made him an athlete. It did not. Being able-bodied made him able-bodied. Being an athlete requires training, discipline, practice, and the kind of sustained effort that Cartman has never applied to anything except manipulation. The disabled athletes at the Special Olympics are athletes. They have trained, they have practiced, they have developed their bodies and their techniques through months and years of dedicated work. Cartman has done none of this. And so the outcome is exactly what it would be in any domain where a dedicated practitioner faces a complete amateur. The amateur is destroyed. What makes this karma particularly satisfying from a structural perspective is that it requires no one to actively punish Cartman. No character delivers justice. No authority figure catches him cheating. The universe does not intervene. The punishment is simply the natural, unmanipulated result of a fair competition in which one participant is worse than all other participants. The competition is not rigged against him. No one sabotages his performance. No one cheats to ensure he loses. He loses because he is bad at sports. He loses because he is out of shape and untrained and has never once in his life put in the work required to be good at something physical. The justice is not dramatic, it is bureaucratic. It is the justice of a scoreboard that does not care who you think you are. It only cares how fast you ran and how far you threw, and whether the ball went where it was supposed to go. And by every metric the scoreboard measures, Eric Cartman is last. His disguise adds an additional layer of irony to the proceedings. He has put considerable effort into appearing disabled. He has practiced his limp, his slur, his contorted facial expressions. He has invested real time and real energy into performing disability convincingly. And the one thing he did not invest any time or energy into was the thing that would actually determine his success in the competition: physical preparation. He prepared the costume, but not the body inside it. He prepared the deception, but not the performance. This ordering of priorities tells you everything about what Cartman values and what he does not. Appearance matters to him. The impression he makes on others matters to him. Actual capability does not. And the Special Olympics, unlike the social arena in which Cartman usually operates, does not reward impressions. It rewards capability. Period. The fourth moment occurs in the 9th season, in an episode that aired on November 9th, 2005. The episode is called Ginger Kids, and it opens with a scene so perfectly constructed that it deserves to be described with some care. Cartman stands in front of his 4th grade classroom. He has a poster. He has visual aids. He has clearly spent time preparing this presentation, which tells you immediately that something terrible is about to happen, because Cartman only invests effort in things that will cause suffering to others. He is about to deliver a hate speech, and he has organized it with the same care that a normal student might bring to a book report. His subject is people with red hair, pale skin, and freckles. He calls them gingers. He has developed a theory about them. The theory is that gingers have no souls. They are, in his taxonomy, a lesser form of human life. They are genetically deficient. They are spiritually empty. They are, he argues with the calm confidence of someone presenting settled science, fundamentally different from and inferior to people who do not share those physical characteristics. The presentation includes statistics he has invented. It includes evidence he has fabricated. It includes logical arguments that follow internal rules of reasoning so twisted that they arrive at their conclusion only by abandoning every principle of actual logic along the way. The visual aids are elaborate. He has charts, he has photographs. He has something approaching a bibliography, though every source is either fabricated or misrepresented so completely that it might as well be fabricated. The effort he has put into this presentation of bigotry is, perversely, impressive. He has clearly spent hours on it. He has organized his hatred with the same care and attention that a diligent student would bring to a genuine academic project. The contrast between the quality of the presentation and the quality of the ideas it presents is part of the episode's commentary. Smart people can be bigots. Organized people can be wrong. The packaging of an argument says nothing about its content. A well-designed PowerPoint full of lies is still full of lies no matter how professional the font choices are. Kyle watches from the audience. Stan watches. Kenny watches. Mr. Garrison, their teacher, watches. The reaction ranges from shock to discomfort to the particular kind of tired recognition that comes from having watched Cartman do this kind of thing before. He has targeted groups before: Jewish people, black people, poor people, people with disabilities, people from other countries. The specific target rotates. The mechanism never changes. Cartman identifies a group. He identifies some collection of human beings who share a characteristic. He declares that characteristic shameful or inferior. He builds an argument, always with the surface appearance of logic, and always resting on foundations of pure invention, that the group in question is less than human in some measurable way. He presents this argument with the confidence of someone delivering established scientific consensus, rather than personal prejudice. He identifies a characteristic of that group that he does not share. He declares that characteristic a deficiency. He declares himself superior by virtue of not possessing it. The hierarchy is constructed with himself at the top, and the hierarchy is declared natural, inevitable, and permanent. Kyle, Stan, and Kenny decide to respond. Their method is not argument. They have argued with Cartman before, and it has never produced results because Cartman does not engage with arguments in good faith. They choose a different approach. They choose direct experience. That night, while Cartman sleeps, they enter his room with hair dye, skin bleach, and materials for creating fake freckles. They work carefully. They apply the dye to his hair, turning it bright red. They apply the bleach to his skin, making it pale. They dot his face with convincing freckles. They transform his appearance thoroughly and professionally into exactly the kind of person he spent the day dehumanizing. When Cartman wakes up and looks in the mirror, he does not suspect his friends. He does not think about the previous day's presentation and wonder whether someone might be teaching him a lesson. He simply accepts, immediately and without investigation, that he has developed a condition. He calls it gingivitis, a disease, something that has struck him overnight through no fault of his own and without warning. His immediate emotional response is interesting. He is horrified, he is distressed, he does not want to be a ginger. Being a ginger, according to his own presentation from the previous day, means being soulless and subhuman. He has categorized himself, unwittingly, into the group he just finished attacking. But here is where the episode becomes something more than a simple lesson about walking in someone else's shoes. Cartman does not respond to his new supposed identity with empathy for the people he attacked. He does not think about how his presentation might have made actual red-haired students feel. He does not experience guilt or remorse or the dawning recognition that his hatred was misdirected and cruel. Instead, he reverses his position entirely. Within hours of believing himself to be a ginger, he has formed a ginger pride group. He has organized meetings. He has begun giving speeches about ginger supremacy. Gingers, he now argues with exactly the same confidence and exactly the same fabricated evidence, are the master race. They are superior to everyone else. Everyone who is not a ginger is inferior and should be treated accordingly. The speed of this reversal is the most important element in the episode. It happens instantly. There is no period of struggle. There is no internal conflict. There is no moment where Cartman sits with the contradiction between his previous beliefs and his new situation and tries to reconcile them. He simply flips. The content of his ideology rotates 180 degrees. The structure of his ideology does not change at all. He still needs to be on top. He still needs a hierarchy. He still needs someone to be beneath him. He still needs to believe that whatever group he belongs to is the superior group and that all other groups exist to be dominated. The label on the group changes. The function of the group within his psyche remains absolutely constant. This reveals the emptiness at the center of Cartman's beliefs more clearly than any argument ever could. He does not have convictions. He does not have a worldview built on evidence, or reason, or lived experience. He has a need, a structural, psychological need to be at the top of whatever hierarchy exists. And he will fill that need by adopting whatever ideology places him there. Anti-ginger one day, pro-ginger the next. It cost him nothing to change because there was never any genuine belief to sacrifice. The beliefs were always shells, containers, empty structures into which he poured the one thing he actually cares about, his own supremacy. The revelation comes in front of the ginger group Cartman has assembled. Kyle reveals the truth. The hair dye, the skin bleach, the fake freckles, none of it is real. Cartman is not a ginger. He never was. He is a fraud who adopted their identity, claimed their grievances, positioned himself as their champion and their leader, and did all of this based on nothing more than some cosmetics applied while he slept. The gingers he was leading realized they were led by a liar. The non-gingers he attacked realized his attacks were never principled. Everyone in the room, regardless of their hair color or their skin tone, now understands the same thing. Cartman will say anything. If it makes him feel powerful, his words mean nothing, his positions mean nothing. He belongs to no group because his membership in any group is always conditional on that group putting him at the top of something. He ends the episode trusted by no one, belonging to nothing. The gingers reject him because he was never one of them. The non-gingers reject him because his hatred was never sincere. He stands in the center of a room where every face is turned against him, where every person, regardless of what they look like, has reached the same conclusion. This person is empty. This person will become anything, say anything, betray anything if it serves his need to feel important. And the room empties, and he stands alone. And the emptiness he has been projecting onto others for the entire episode is finally, publicly, undeniably his own. What this episode contributes to the larger architecture of Cartman's karma across the series is a specific and important lesson about the nature of identity-based hatred. The episode demonstrates, through the specific mechanism of Cartman's instant reversal, that hatred of groups is never actually about the groups themselves. It is about the hater. It is about the hater's need to feel superior. It is about the hater's need to belong to the right category, the winning category, the dominant category. Change the hater's perceived category membership and the hatred flips like a switch. Because the target was never the point. The point was always the hierarchy. The point was always being on top. This is a sophisticated argument delivered through a 22-minute animated comedy, and its sophistication should not be dismissed because of its medium. The episode understands something about the psychology of bigotry that many longer, more serious, more respectable explorations of the topic fail to articulate clearly. Bigotry is not a belief about the inferiority of others. It is a belief about the superiority of the self. It uses other groups as scaffolding for that belief, but the scaffolding can be swapped out at any time without affecting the structure it supports. Cartman's hatred of gingers was never really about ginger. The moment he believes he is a ginger, the entire edifice restructures itself instantaneously because the underlying need has not changed. Only the content has changed, and content in the world of ideological hatred is infinitely replaceable. The episode aired in November of 2005, During a period in American culture when questions about group identity, about who belongs where, about which categories carry privilege and which carry stigma, were becoming increasingly central to public discourse. The show's commentary on these questions is characteristically irreverent, but also characteristically precise. It is not arguing that all group identities are meaningless. It is arguing that group identities weaponized for the purpose of establishing hierarchy are meaningless, because the person wielding them will abandon them the moment they cease to serve that purpose. The weapon is interchangeable. The wielder's need is constant. The fifth moment, the one that opened this examination, comes from the 10th season, aired on May 3, 2006, and it is the 146th episode of the series overall. By this point, nearly a decade into the show's run, Cartman's behavior has escalated to the point where no conventional approach to child discipline can reach him. His mother, Leanne Cartman, has exhausted every resource available to a parent whose child has become, in practical terms, her captor. She has hired psychologists. She has brought in behavioral specialists. She has tried reality television programs that promise to reform difficult children through tough love and structured environments. Nothing has worked. The show takes time to establish exactly why nothing has worked, and the answer is both simple and terrifying. Cartman does not resist authority the way a normal, difficult child resists authority. He does not refuse to comply. He does not throw tantrums that eventually burn themselves out. He identifies the personal vulnerabilities of whatever authority figure has been sent to handle him, and he exploits those vulnerabilities with a precision and a coldness that belong more to psychological warfare than to childhood rebellion. He broke a nanny. Not metaphorically. He psychologically dismantled a trained professional until she lost control of her bodily functions in his mother's house. He drove another specialist to tears within hours. He made a therapist question her own career and competence. Each attempt to discipline him results not in his reformation, but in the destruction of whoever was sent to reform him. Leanne is desperate in a way the show treats with genuine respect. She is not played as a fool. She is not mocked for her inability to control her son. She is portrayed as a woman who loves her child, who wants to do right by him, and who has been systematically terrorized by the person she loves most in the world. Her desperation is real. Her fear is real. Her exhaustion, the bone-deep exhaustion of a person who has been fighting a war they cannot win for years, is presented without comedy. The audience is meant to feel sympathy for her. The audience is meant to understand that Cartman's behavior has a real human cost, and that cost is paid primarily by the person closest to him. Cesar Millan arrives at the Cartman household. He arrives not as a child psychologist, not as a behavioral therapist, not as any kind of specialist in human childhood development. He arrives as a dog trainer. The show presents this not as an insult to Cartman, but as a recognition of what Cartman has made himself. He has placed himself, through years of deliberate escalation, beyond the reach of any approach that treats him as a rational being capable of engaging with logic or emotion. The psychologists failed because they tried to reason with him. The nannies failed because they tried to establish authority through human dominance hierarchies that Cartman can subvert. The reality TV experts failed because they relied on shame, and Cartman has no shame. Millan brings something different, something that does not depend on reason or shame or social convention. He brings calm, assertive energy. He brings the same approach he uses on aggressive dogs, an approach based not on reasoning or negotiation or any form of intellectual engagement, but on pure physical and psychological presence, on being the calmer, more grounded, more centered entity in the room, and simply waiting for the less grounded entity to recognize that its chaos is not working. And aggressive dogs cannot manipulate because manipulation requires the kind of intelligence that the approach does not engage with. Millan does not talk to Cartman. He does not negotiate. He does not ask Cartman how he feels, or why he acts the way he acts, or what he needs that he is not getting. He simply establishes presence. He establishes boundaries. When Cartman screams, Millan does not react. When Cartman threatens, Millan does not engage. When Cartman tries to escalate, Millan remains exactly where he is, at exactly the same energy level, with exactly the same calm, implacable authority. He does not match Cartman's escalation, because matching escalation is how Cartman wins. Cartman wins by pushing until the other person either retreats or pushes back, because both retreating and pushing back are forms of engagement, and engagement is the field on which Cartman plays. Millan does not play. He simply exists, calmly, consistently, immovably. The contrast between Cartman's energy and Millan's energy is the visual thesis of the episode. Cartman is loud, Millan is quiet. Cartman is chaotic, Millan is still. Cartman escalates, Millan maintains. Cartman demands attention. Millan offers none. The two energies exist in the same room and the outcome is never in doubt, because Milan's approach is designed specifically for entities that use chaos and escalation as tools of control. He has spent his career around animals whose entire behavioral repertoire is built on making noise and demanding reactions, and his entire method is built on refusing to provide those reactions. He is the absence of what Cartman needs. He is the void into which Cartman's manipulation falls without echo or response. And without echo, without response, without the feedback loop that validates the behavior extinguishes itself. It was always dependent on the reaction of others. Remove the reaction and the behavior has no reason to continue. And Cartman breaks. Not dramatically, not in a single cathartic moment of defeat. He simply runs out of tactics. He screams and Milan does not react. He threatens and Milan does not flinch. He tries to push boundaries and the boundaries do not move. He tries every tool he has developed across 10 seasons of the show, and every single tool fails against the same calm, unmoving, unengageable wall of quiet authority. His manipulation only works on people who engage with it. Remove the engagement and the manipulation has nothing to attach to. It spins in the air, searching for a grip, and finds only smooth stone. Eventually, Cartman sits. He stays, he does his homework, he speaks politely, he clears his plate, he becomes, briefly and miraculously, an ordinary child. The karma here is not pain or loss or embarrassment. The karma is reduction. Cartman is made small. He is made ordinary. He is made manageable. And for Cartman, whose entire identity is built on being extraordinary, on being the smartest and most dangerous and most powerful person in any room, being ordinary is worse than any physical punishment could be. It is the erasure of the self. It is the demonstration that the self he has constructed is not real, that it is not based on actual power or actual intelligence, but only on the willingness to escalate beyond where normal people will follow. Take away the escalation and what remains is just a boy. Just a regular boy sitting on a floor doing homework. Nothing special, nothing dangerous, nothing worth being afraid of. Leanne watches this happen and cries. The tears come from a place so deep that the show does not attempt to name it. Relief, grief, joy, terror that it might not last, gratitude so overwhelming it registers as physical pain. She has spent years being afraid of her own son, years being controlled and humiliated and terrorized by a child she brought into the world and loves without reservation. And now someone has walked into her home and made it stop. Just stopped it, calmly and completely, and without drama. Her son is sitting on the floor and he is not screaming and he is not threatening and he is not making her life a living nightmare. And she does not know what to do with the feeling that produces, because she has not felt it in so long that it has become unfamiliar. The show allows this moment to be genuine. It allows the emotion to land without irony. For once, South Park is not being funny. It is being true. The resolution does not hold, because it cannot. The show needs Cartman. The show's central dynamic requires Cartman's cruelty, but the temporary fix is itself the punishment, because it proves that the suffering was always optional. Cartman could stop at any time. He is not compelled by forces beyond his control. He is not the victim of circumstances or brain chemistry or childhood trauma so severe that his behavior is inevitable. He could simply stop. He could be a normal child. He could be happy. The episode proved it. And every subsequent episode, every future act of cruelty and manipulation and destruction is colored by the knowledge that he chose this. He looked at normalcy and peace and simple human connection, and he chose the other thing. He chose the cycle. He chose this. The Cyst episode also raises a question that the show has been circling for its entire run without ever directly answering. What does Cartman want? Not what does he want in any specific scheme or any specific episode. What does he fundamentally at the deepest level of his psychology desire? The obvious answer is power, control, dominance. But the Cyst episode complicates this reading by showing that when he is stripped of those things, when he is simply an obedient child doing homework and eating dinner with his mother, he does not appear to be suffering. He appears, for a brief window, to be content. Not happy in the manic, triumphant way he is happy when a scheme succeeds. Content in a quiet, ordinary way. The way a child is content when the world is stable and predictable, and no one is asking anything extraordinary of him. This suggests that Cartman's drive for dominance is not actually what he wants. It is what he has instead of what he wants. What he wants, the episode implies, is the simple security of a structured environment with clear rules and consistent enforcement. He wants someone to be in charge who is not him. He wants to be told what to do by someone he cannot manipulate, because if he can manipulate the person in charge, then no one is actually in charge. And if no one is in charge, then the world is chaotic and unsafe and he has to rely on himself for everything. And relying on himself for everything is exhausting. Milan provides this structure. He provides the calm, immovable authority that says, these are the rules. They will not change. I will not be manipulated. You are safe to simply comply. And Cartman complies. Immediately. Gratefully. Almost with relief. As though the weight of being a tyrant has been lifted from him and he is allowed, finally, to just be a child. This reading of the episode suggests that Cartman's cruelty is not the expression of his true self, but the expression of his defense mechanism. He behaves monstrously because the world has failed to provide him with the structure he needs to behave normally. His mother cannot provide it. His teachers cannot provide it. So he fills the vacuum with his own will, and his will, unrestrained by external structure, turns dark and exploitative because that is what unrestrained will does in the absence of boundaries. None of this excuses him. The episode is careful about that. Understanding why Cartman behaves the way he does is not the same as forgiving him for it. He still causes real harm. He still destroys real people. He still treats the world as his personal domain to be exploited without consequence. But the cyst episode adds a layer of tragedy to the comedy that the show rarely acknowledges elsewhere. It suggests that Cartman's punishment is not just the karma he receives from the universe. His punishment is also the person he has become. The person he did not have to become. The person a different childhood, a more structured household, a single consistent authority figure might have prevented. He is not just a villain, he is a failure of the systems that were supposed to contain him. And that failure has cost everyone, including him. The sixth instance arrives in the 11th season, in an episode that aired on October 3rd, 2007. Le Petit Tourette begins in a toy store, a setting chosen for its innocence and its ordinariness. Cartman is there. Bunners is there. A child with Tourette syndrome is there. The child says something inappropriate. It bursts out of him without warning, without intent, without any possibility of prevention. The adults in the store react with a mixture of discomfort and compassion. They understand. They know the child cannot help it. They extend the tolerance and the patience that decency requires when confronted with someone whose neurology operates differently from their own. Cartman watches this interaction with the attention of someone studying a system for exploitable weaknesses. He does not see a child suffering from a neurological condition. He does not register the obvious distress the involuntary outbursts cause. He sees only the reaction of the adults, the tolerance, the compassion, the lack of punishment. He processes this scene not as a moment of human complexity that deserves understanding, but as a transaction that can be reverse engineered and replicated. If a certain input, involuntary offensive speech, produces a certain output, compassion and accommodation, then all he needs to do is simulate the input convincingly enough to harvest the output. The empathy of strangers is, in his calculation, a free resource. You simply need the right key to unlock it. In Cartman's mind, the child has found a way to say terrible things without facing consequences. The child has discovered through no deliberate effort of his own the loophole in social behavior that Cartman has been searching for his entire life. The ability to say anything, no matter how cruel, no matter how offensive, no matter how damaging, and to be forgiven for it before the words have even finished leaving your mouth. Within the week, Cartman has announced to his mother and his school that he has developed Tourette syndrome. He has done no research into what Tourette syndrome actually looks like, because research might complicate the simplicity of the exploit. He simply begins saying terrible things and announcing afterward that he cannot help it. He says racial slurs in class. He says sexually inappropriate things to teachers. He insults other students with language that would normally result in immediate and severe consequences. He says things that, under normal circumstances, would get him suspended. Things that would bring calls to his mother. Things that would result in meetings with the principal and possibly involvement from the school district. But none of these consequences materialize because the adults around him believe he cannot help it. They believe he is suffering from a condition that removes his agency over his own speech. And so they absorb the cruelty, they take it in and process it as symptoms rather than as attacks. They extend compassion where punishment would normally live. And Cartman bathes in this dynamic with the satisfaction of someone who has solved a puzzle that everyone said was impossible. And the system responds exactly as he predicted it would. Adults comfort him. Teachers accommodate him. The school nurse expresses sympathy. No one punishes him because punishing someone for symptoms of a neurological condition would be cruel, and the adults in his life are trying not to be cruel. The show spends time with this phase of the plan working exactly as intended. And this is important because it allows the audience to feel the full weight of what Cartman is doing. He is not just being offensive. He is weaponizing the compassion that society extends to people with genuine medical conditions. He is using the infrastructure of care and accommodation that was built to protect vulnerable people, and he is converting it into a shield for his own cruelty. Every time an adult says, "It is okay, we understand," that adult is extending kindness to someone who is exploiting kindness itself as a resource. The exploit is not just offensive, it is parasitic. It feeds on the goodness of other people. He gets himself booked on a national talk show. He is going to appear on live television and use his fake condition to say the most offensive things he can think of to the largest possible audience. This is the plan reaching its maximum expression. Unlimited cruelty broadcast to millions of people with zero accountability, shielded by the assumption that a child with Tourette syndrome cannot be blamed for what he says. The plan is, from a purely strategic perspective, brilliant. It is the perfect crime executed on the largest possible stage. And then the plan turns. The mechanism through which it turns is elegant in a way that demands appreciation. Cartman has been practicing unfiltered speech. For days, he has been deliberately saying whatever comes into his head without any internal screening. He has been training his brain to bypass the filter that normally sits between thought and utterance, the filter that selects which thoughts to vocalize and which to suppress. This is the core of his disguise. To convincingly fake involuntary speech, he has to actually produce speech without the normal delay of self-censorship. He has to mean it. His brain has to genuinely operate in unfiltered mode for the performance to be convincing. The problem, the beautiful and devastating problem, is that the human brain is not a machine you can switch between modes at will. The self-censoring mechanism is not a program you can toggle on and off. It is a habit. It is a pattern built through years of practice. It is a neural pathway that strengthens with use and weakens with disuse. Cartman has been actively weakening it. He has been deliberately not using it. And like any muscle left unused, it is atrophied. His filter is gone. Not just for the statements he wants to make, for everything. For all of it. The filter was one mechanism. It did not distinguish between offensive statements about other people and private revelations about himself. When the filter goes, it goes entirely. He begins saying things he did not intend to say, personal things, humiliating things. He reveals that he cried himself to sleep the previous night. He reveals intimate and embarrassing details about his home life. He reveals fears and insecurities and moments of weakness that he has spent years constructing an elaborate persona to conceal from the world. And he cannot stop. The words come out and he reaches for the filter that is supposed to catch them before they escape, and the filter is not there. It is gone. He removed it, on purpose, as part of a plan. And now it will not come back just because he needs it. The escalation toward the television appearance is constructed as a horror sequence. Cartman realizes that he is about to go on national television. He realizes that the unfiltered speech that was supposed to serve him will betray him instead. He realizes that he is going to sit in front of millions of people and reveal, compulsively and unstoppably, the most embarrassing truths about his own life. Things about his mother, things about his loneliness, things about the gap between who he pretends to be and who he actually is. He begs for help. He genuinely begs. The boy who has never sincerely asked for help in his life is on his knees asking someone to stop what is about to happen. The irony is exquisite and total. He began this scheme as an attempt to exploit the compassion that people extend to those with genuine conditions. And now he genuinely needs that compassion. He genuinely needs someone to help him with a condition that, while not technically Tourette syndrome, is functionally identical to it in every way that matters. He has become, through his own deliberate actions, exactly the kind of vulnerable person whose vulnerability he was exploiting. The exploit has become the condition. The performance has become the reality. The mask has fused to the face and will not come off, regardless of how desperately he pulls at it. Because what is about to happen is the demolition of his carefully constructed persona on live television. And he built that persona for a reason. And without it, he is just a frightened, lonely child who cries at night and pretends not to. The episode demonstrates with a precision that approaches the clinical that self-control is not just a social nicety. It is not just what nice people do. Self-control is a psychological survival mechanism. It protects you from yourself. It protects your vulnerabilities. It keeps the private and the public. Remove it, even temporarily, even performatively, even as part of a strategy that seemed clever at the time, and you discover that putting it back is not simply a matter of deciding to. The mechanism has been damaged. The pathway has been weakened. The filter that took years to build has been dismantled in days, and rebuilding it will take longer than the crisis can wait. This is karma delivered not by other characters, but by Cartman's own neurology. His brain punishes him for misusing it. He treated his capacity for speech as a weapon and removed all its safety mechanisms, and the weapon fired in every direction simultaneously, hitting its targets and its wielder with equal force. He did not get Tourette syndrome. He gave himself something worse. He gave himself a condition that looks exactly like Tourette syndrome from the outside, but is, on the inside, the natural consequence of his own deliberate choices. He cannot even claim victimhood because everything that happened to him, he did to himself. The punishment is internal, inescapable, self-inflicted, and poetic in a way that transcends anything the other characters in the episode could have done to him deliberately. There is also a production-level observation worth making about this episode's place in the series chronology. Le Petit Tourette aired in the 11th season, which means it was produced by writers who had been working with the character of Eric Cartman for over a decade. They knew him completely by this point. They understood every mechanism in his psychological toolkit. And the choice to have him defeated by his own brain rather than by external forces suggests a maturation in how the show thinks about karma. In the early seasons, karma was often imposed from outside. The universe took things from Cartman. People took things from Cartman. Systems caught him and punished him. By season 11, the show has internalized the principle that the most devastating karma is self-generating. The best punishment is the one that requires no punisher. The most poetic justice is the one that the transgressor delivers to himself, using the exact tool he attempted to use against others, turning it inward with the same force he intended to direct outward. The episode also establishes a principle about the relationship between deception and self-knowledge that has profound implications for Cartman's character going forward. When you spend enough time pretending to be something, you lose clarity about what you actually are. When you perform a version of yourself that is not real, the boundaries between the performance and the reality begin to dissolve. Cartman performed a person without self-control, and in performing it, he became a person without self-control. The performance consumed the performer. The mask fused to the face. This is not just a commentary on Tourette syndrome or on Cartman specifically. It is a commentary on the nature of all sustained deception. Liars eventually lose track of the truth. Con artists eventually believe their own cons. People who perform emotions they do not feel eventually cannot distinguish those performances from genuine feeling. The self is not stable. It is constructed moment by moment through action and habit. And if your actions and habits are those of a person without a filter, eventually, that is what you become. Cartman proved it. The 7th of these moments arrives in the 12th season, in an episode that aired on October 15th, 2008. Breast Cancer Show Ever is, at its core, about the distance between projected power and actual power. About what happens when a person whose dominance is entirely verbal meets a person who is willing to make dominance physical. The episode begins with Wendy Testaberger standing at the front of her classroom. She has prepared a presentation. The presentation is about breast cancer awareness. She has done research. She has organized her points. She cares about this topic in the way that thoughtful children sometimes care about the world beyond their immediate experience. She is trying to do something good with the time and attention the class has given her. Cartman responds by making crude jokes, breast jokes, cancer jokes. He makes noises that disrupt her presentation. He makes comments under his breath that are loud enough for other students to hear. He turns her sincere effort into material for his own amusement. He does this not because he has any particular opinion about breast cancer or about Wendy. He does this because someone else is at the center of attention and he cannot tolerate a room in which he is not the most noticed, most discussed, most attended to person present. Wendy is being listened to. This is unacceptable. So he makes himself impossible to ignore, and in the process, he destroys the thing she was trying to build. Wendy's reaction is different from what the audience expects and different from what Cartman expects. She does not cry. She does not report him to the teacher. She does not engage in the kind of verbal sparring that Cartman excels at. She walks up to him and she tells him that after school, she is going to fight him. Physically. With her fists. In front of everyone. And she means it. The audience can tell she means it because the show has spent years establishing Wendy as a character who does not say things she does not mean. She is intelligent and measured and careful with her words, and when she says she is going to hit Eric Cartman until he is on the ground, she is describing a future she fully intends to create. Cartman's reaction is immediate, total, and deeply revealing. He panics, not externally at first. Externally, he performs confidence. He says he is not worried. He says Wendy is weak. He says fighting a girl would be easy. But internally and increasingly externally as the episode progresses, he is terrified. Because Eric Cartman is a physical coward. His power has never been physical. He has never won a fight. He has never needed to. His dominance is entirely constructed from verbal manipulation, psychological pressure, and the strategic deployment of cruelty at moments designed to maximize the target's inability to respond. His power depends entirely on the conflict remaining verbal. The moment a conflict becomes physical, he has no tools, no training, no experience, no muscle memory, nothing. He begins trying to escape. The attempts are frantic and escalating, and each one reveals more clearly how desperate he is. He goes to the principal and tries to get the fight canceled on the grounds that Wendy is being violent. The principal is unmoved. He offers Wendy money to call it off. She refuses. He offers to apologize. She refuses. He offers to apologize publicly. She refuses. He begs, actually begs, on his knees, with tears in his eyes. He tells her he is sorry. He tells her he did not mean it. He tells her he will never disrupt her presentations again. He tells her anything she wants to hear, because anything she wants to hear is cheaper than getting hit. But Wendy does not accept, because Wendy understands something that Cartman's other victims have not understood. His apologies are not real. His promises are not real. If she lets him go today, he will do exactly the same thing next week, because he has learned that crying and begging can get him out of consequences. And the lesson learned is a lesson repeated. The fight happens after school. Every child in the school is present. They form a circle. The audience within the show mirrors the audience watching the show. Everyone wants to see this. Cartman has been verbally and psychologically bullying Wendy and every other student at this school for 12 seasons. No one has ever made him answer for it physically. No one has ever translated his cruelty into physical currency and demanded payment in full. Until now, Wendy hits him. He does not effectively respond. She hits him again. He falls. She keeps hitting him. He bleeds. He does not get up. He does not fight back in any meaningful way. His arms come up to protect his face. Not to fight, to shield. The body language is entirely defensive. Every movement he makes is the movement of someone trying to make the pain stop, rather than someone trying to inflict pain in return. He has no training. He has no instinct for combat. He has never been in a fight because his entire strategy for living has been designed, precisely and deliberately, to prevent situations from ever reaching this point. And now that one has reached this point despite his best efforts to prevent it, he has nothing. No skills, no conditioning, no reflexes. Just the soft, untested body of a child who has spent his entire life avoiding exactly this. The disproportion between his projected toughness and his actual toughness is revealed completely and publicly. Every child in the school watches as the boy who made them afraid is beaten by someone smaller than him, someone he considered beneath him, someone he dismissed as weak because she was a girl, and being a girl meant, in his framework, being incapable of genuine force. No one intervenes. This is important. No teacher steps in. No adult arrives to break up the fight. No authority figure rescues Cartman from the consequences of his behavior. The episode makes a deliberate choice to let this play out to its natural conclusion without interruption. The systems that should have stopped Cartman years ago, the teachers who watched him bully students without acting, the administrators who allowed his behavior to continue because addressing it was too difficult, those systems now stand aside while the student they failed to protect protects herself. The message is not that violence is good. The message is that when systems of accountability fail, when the people charged with preventing harm refuse to prevent it, the people being harmed eventually take the matter into their own hands. And Cartman discovers that his immunity was never real. It was always contingent on the people around him choosing not to hit back. The aftermath is not limited to the physical injuries, which are significant but temporary. The aftermath is structural. Cartman's social position has been permanently altered by the public nature of his defeat. His entire persona was built on the projection of danger. He made other children believe that crossing him would have consequences they could not survive. He cultivated an atmosphere of fear that gave him power without requiring him to actually be powerful. Wendy demonstrated, publicly and irrefutably, that those consequences are imaginary. She demonstrated that Cartman cannot back up a single one of his implied threats with physical action. Every future threat he makes will be heard through the filter of this memory. Every future attempt to intimidate will be undermined by the image of him bleeding on the ground while Wendy stood over him. She did not just hurt him. She dismantled the mythology. She showed everyone what was behind the curtain. And what was behind the curtain was a boy who could not take a single punch without falling down. The show does not present this as gratuitous violence or as bullying reversed. It presents it as the natural, inevitable, structurally necessary consequence of years of unchecked verbal and psychological abuse. Cartman was never going to stop voluntarily. The systems designed to stop him had failed. The only remaining vector of accountability was direct personal physical consequence delivered by someone who had earned the right to deliver it through years of being his victim. Wendy earned that right. The episode gives her the chance to exercise it. And the karma is not just that Cartman got hurt. The karma is that everyone saw. The secret of his weakness is now public knowledge, and public knowledge cannot be suppressed by any amount of verbal manipulation. The episode invites consideration of a broader question about the nature of power in social environments, particularly the social environments of children. Cartman's power was always a performance. It was always a projection. It was based not on any actual capacity for violence, but on the successful cultivation of a reputation that implied violence without ever delivering it. He had never actually beaten anyone up. He had never demonstrated physical dominance. He had simply created an atmosphere in which people assumed he could be dangerous, and that assumption, maintained over years through verbal aggression and psychological manipulation, was sufficient to give him real social power. People feared him. Fear gave him control. Control gave him the ability to dictate terms. The entire system rested on an assumption that no one had ever tested. Wendy tested it. Wendy said, "Prove it. Show everyone that the danger is real. Back up the reputation with actual force," and Cartman could not. The assumption was wrong. The fear was unearned. The power was from the very beginning a bluff that no one had ever called. And all it took to collapse the entire structure, years of carefully cultivated intimidation reduced to nothing in 3 minutes, was one person willing to call it. One person willing to say, "You claim to be dangerous, so be dangerous to me right now in front of everyone and let us see what happens." What happened was nothing. What happened was Cartman on the ground. What happened was the revelation that the Emperor had no clothes, delivered not through clever rhetoric or logical argument, but through the simple, ancient, inarguable language of physical confrontation. He was exposed not as a villain, but as a fraud. Not as someone dangerous, but as someone who successfully pretended to be dangerous for a very long time. And pretense, once exposed, cannot be restored. You cannot re-establish a bluff that everyone has already seen called. The cards are on the table. The hand is empty. Everyone knows. The 8th of these karma moments occurs in the 13th season, in an episode that aired on April 8, 2009. Fish Sticks is the 186th episode of the series overall, and it begins with something genuine. Jimmy Vollmer writes a joke, he works on it at his desk, he refines it, he tests different versions, he arrives at a final form that pleases him, a play on words involving fish sticks and a common word that sounds like them, and the joke is good. Within the world of the episode, the joke is phenomenal. It goes viral. The entire country tells it. Talk shows reference it. Comedians acknowledge it. It becomes part of the cultural language overnight. Jimmy Vollmer, the boy with a stutter and crutches who has been a supporting character for years, has created something that millions of people love. Cartman was present when the joke was written. He was in Jimmy's house. He was eating snacks. He may have said something while Jimmy worked. He may have made a comment that was tangentially related to the subject of jokes or fish or sticks. The exact nature of his presence during the creative process is deliberately left vague by the episode, because the vagueness is the point. Whatever Cartman contributed, it was not the joke. The joke is Jimmy's. Everyone who was there knows this. The audience knows this. The show makes it clear beyond any possibility of dispute. And then Cartman begins telling people he co-wrote the joke. This is a lie, but it is the kind of lie that exists at the milder end of the spectrum of dishonesty. Many people have slightly inflated their contribution to a group project. Many people have said "we" when they meant "I," or "I" when they meant "we." This kind of credit stealing is common and human, and while dishonest, is at least comprehensible as a failure of ordinary vanity. But Cartman does not stop at ordinary vanity. He cannot stop, because stopping would require a level of self-awareness that his narcissism has made structurally impossible. The episode tracks the progression of Cartman's internal narrative through a series of flashbacks. These flashbacks represent what Cartman remembers, not what he claims to remember, not what he tells other people happened, what he actually, genuinely, sincerely experiences as his memory of the event. The first flashback shows something close to reality. Jimmy works on the joke while Cartman sits nearby eating. The second flashback shows Cartman making a contribution, a suggestion that sparks Jimmy's creativity. The third flashback shows Cartman doing most of the creative work while Jimmy offers minor assistance. The fourth and final flashback shows Cartman writing the entire joke alone, start to finish, while Jimmy stands in the corner contributing nothing. Each revision is presented to the audience as the thing Cartman genuinely believes happened. His brain has overwritten the previous memory with a new version, not gradually, not over time. In real time, while the audience watches, his perception of the past reorganizes itself to better serve his ego. He is not choosing to lie. His psychology is lying for him, below the level of conscious awareness, without his permission and without his knowledge. He genuinely cannot tell the difference between the real memory and the fabricated one because, from the inside, they feel identical. Memory is not a recording, it is a reconstruction. And Cartman's reconstruction engine is calibrated to produce exactly one output, a narrative in which he is the most important person. Jimmy confronts him. Jimmy is calm about it. Jimmy has witnesses. Jimmy has a version of events that is corroborated by everyone who was present. Jimmy presents this evidence clearly and without hostility, because Jimmy is a reasonable person having a reasonable conversation with someone he believes is also capable of reason. But Jimmy is wrong about that. Cartman is not capable of reason on this subject, because this subject touches his self-image, and his self-image is defended by mechanisms that operate below the level where reason can reach. Cartman dismisses the evidence. He dismisses Jimmy's memory of events. He does this not with the demeanor of someone who knows they are lying and is trying to maintain a lie. He does it with the genuine confusion and indignation of someone who is being told by multiple people that something they clearly remember happening did not actually happen. From inside Cartman's experience, he is the victim here. People are denying his creative accomplishment. People are trying to take credit from him. People are lying about what happened in that room. His distress is real because his delusion is real. This is a form of insanity that does not look like insanity from the outside. Cartman does not hear voices, he does not see things that are not there, he does not exhibit any of the symptoms that society typically associates with mental illness. His delusion is perfectly camouflaged inside normal-appearing behavior. He simply believes things that are not true about his own past, and he believes them with the same confidence and the same internal certainty that a healthy person brings to genuine memories. The insanity is invisible because its symptoms look exactly like ordinary confidence. Someone who says, "I wrote that joke with genuine conviction," appears, from the outside, exactly the same as someone who actually wrote the joke and is stating a fact. The only way to distinguish between them is external evidence, and Cartman has demonstrated that external evidence has no power over his internal narrative. The karma here is not a beating or a financial loss or a public humiliation of the conventional sort. The karma is something far worse and far more permanent. The karma is the demonstration that Cartman's narcissism has progressed to clinical delusion. His relationship with reality is not merely strained, it is adversarial. Truth has become his enemy because truth contradicts the story he needs to believe about himself. His brain has therefore chosen story over truth, narrative over reality, ego over accuracy. And it will continue making that choice, forever, in every situation, without limit. He will spend his entire life rewriting his memories to cast himself as the hero, the genius, the creator, the leader, the most important person in whatever story is being told. And he will never know he is doing it. This is not a punishment that arrives and then passes. This is a permanent condition. It is the architecture of his mind turning against the possibility of growth or connection or authentic relationship with another person. How do you have a genuine friendship with someone whose memory of your shared experiences will be rewritten to serve their ego? How do you collaborate with someone who will remember your work as their work? How do you trust someone whose perception of what happened between you will shift to match whatever narrative makes them look best? You cannot. The people around Cartman will eventually stop trying. They will stop explaining what really happened. They will stop presenting evidence. They will stop engaging with the delusion. They will simply leave. And Cartman will be alone with his false memories, which will feel exactly like real memories, and he will not understand why everyone left, because in his version of events, he did nothing wrong. He never does anything wrong. His memories will not allow it. The episode parallels Cartman's delusion with that of Kanye West, who throughout the episode is unable to understand that the fish sticks joke is at his expense. The parallel is precise. Both figures are presented as people whose self-image has become so inflated that it functions as a barrier between them and the actual world. Both refuse evidence. Both dismiss consensus. Both retreat further into their own narrative when reality challenges it. The difference is that Kanye is presented as potentially capable of self-awareness, of one day understanding the joke. Cartman is not. Cartman's condition is presented as permanent and total and unfixable. He will live inside his own fiction until he dies, and the fiction will grow more elaborate and more disconnected from consensus reality with every passing year, because every year provides more memories to rewrite and more evidence to dismiss. The episode also makes a quiet but important argument about the relationship between creativity and ego that resonates beyond the specific context of a joke about fish sticks. Cartman wants to be creative. He wants to be the person who has ideas, who makes things, who contributes something original to the world. But his narcissism prevents him from ever actually doing creative work. because creative work requires the ability to fail, to iterate, to accept criticism, to recognize when something is not working and start over. Cartman cannot do any of these things because each one requires a momentary acknowledgement that he is not perfect, and his psychology will not allow that acknowledgement under any circumstances. So instead of creating, he steals. And instead of acknowledging that he steals, he rewrites his memory to believe that he created. The stealing is not laziness. It is the only option available to someone whose ego will not permit the vulnerability that genuine creation requires. You cannot write a joke if you cannot accept that your first attempt might not be funny. You cannot make something original if you cannot tolerate the possibility that what you make might be bad. Cartman cannot tolerate these possibilities because they threaten his self-image, and his self-image is the thing he protects above all else, above truth, above relationship, above reality itself. Jimmy, by contrast, can create because Jimmy has something Cartman does not: genuine humility about the creative process. Jimmy works at his jokes, he tries different versions, he accepts that some attempts fail, he iterates, he improves. He does the actual work of creativity, which is mostly the work of being wrong over and over until you are finally right. Cartman cannot be wrong. Therefore, Cartman cannot create, therefore Cartman must steal. And therefore Cartman must live in a reality where his stealing is actually creating, because admitting the theft would require admitting the inability, and admitting the inability would require humility. And humility is the one thing his psychology has made permanently unavailable to him. The 9th instance comes from the 14th season, in an episode that aired on November 10th, 2010. Coon vs. Coon and Friends is a season finale, and it operates at a scale that is deliberately and significantly larger than any of Cartman's previous karma moments. The earlier episodes dealt in personal consequences, financial ruin, social embarrassment, physical defeat. The stakes were bounded by the ordinary dimensions of a child's life. This episode breaks through those bounds entirely. It introduces the cosmic, it introduces the mythological. And it does so because Cartman's transgression in this episode is itself cosmic and mythological in its scope and its arrogance. The setup involves the superhero group Coon and Friends. Cartman founded this group. He created the concept. He assigned himself the leadership role under his alter ego, the Coon. The other boys participate. Kenny as Mysterion, Kyle, Stan, all of them with their own ridiculous superhero names and makeshift costumes. On the surface, it is children playing pretend. Below the surface, it is a test of whether Cartman can function as part of a group of equals, whether he can share authority, whether he can accept that other people's ideas might have value, whether he can be one member of a team rather than the sole commander of a subordinate force. He cannot. The test fails immediately and catastrophically. When the other members of Coon and Friends disagree with his decisions, when they vote against his proposals, when they suggest that perhaps his methods are too extreme or his plans too reckless, Cartman does not accept the democratic outcome. He does not compromise, he does not negotiate, he does not even argue in the sense that argument implies a willingness to be convinced. He escalates. He escalates in the way that only Cartman escalates, which is to say he abandons all proportion between the offense he has received and the response he delivers. This is the defining characteristic of his approach to conflict, and always has been. Someone disagrees with him and he responds as though they have declared war. Someone votes against his idea and he responds as though they have committed treason. The gap between stimulus and response is not just large, it is categorically different. The stimulus exists in the domain of normal social interaction. The response exists in the domain of existential warfare. He cannot modulate, he does not have a setting between 0 and maximum. Every conflict is a total conflict. Every disagreement is a betrayal deserving of total annihilation. This is exhausting for everyone around him, and it is, ultimately, the reason they banish him, not because of any single act, but because of the accumulated exhaustion of dealing with someone for whom every interaction carries the possibility of nuclear escalation. He allows himself with Cthulhu, the Lovecraftian elder god, a being of incomprehensible cosmic power, an entity from beyond the dimensions of normal existence, a creature whose name alone drives humans to madness in the original fiction it comes from. Cartman befriends this entity. He uses it as a weapon. He points it at his former teammates, the children who committed the unforgivable sin of outvoting him on a question of superhero tactics. He brings the power of an elder god to bear against 9-year-olds who disagreed with him. The disproportion is not just absurd, it is revealing. It tells you exactly what Cartman believes disagreement deserves. Disagreement deserves annihilation. Disagreement deserves cosmic punishment. Disagreement deserves the full force of an incomprehensible entity unleashed without restraint or mercy. He commands Cthulhu to attack various targets. He sends the Elder God against people and places that have nothing to do with the original disagreement. The power corrupts him, or rather, it reveals the corruption that was always present. He is not being changed by power. He is being enabled by it. The cruelty was always there. The will to dominate was always there. The willingness to destroy anyone who defied him was always there. He simply lacked the means. Cthulhu provides the means, and the means are immediately turned against the people closest to him. This is perhaps the most important detail. He does not use his cosmic power against enemies. He uses it against friends, against the only people who willingly spent time with him, against the only people who included him in things and tolerated his behavior and gave him the benefit of countless doubts over countless years. They are the first targets, because they are the ones who defied him. And defiance from people you consider your subordinates is, in the logic of a tyrant, worse than defiance from strangers. The other children respond with the only resource available to people facing a force they cannot match: solidarity. They cannot fight Cthulhu directly. They cannot match Cartman's power. They cannot escalate above him because he has allied himself with the highest possible escalation. So they work together. They cooperate. They trust each other. They combine their separate intelligences and their separate abilities into a collective response that is not more powerful than Cthulhu, but is more precise, more targeted, more focused on the specific problem of removing Cartman from the equation rather than defeating him in a direct confrontation that they would inevitably lose. Their solution is banishment. They do not kill Cartman. They do not hurt him. They do not match his cruelty with cruelty of their own. They simply remove him. They send him to a dark oblivion dimension, a place of nothing, a void, a space without other people, without light, without anything that Cartman's personality can attach to or feed on. He is not destroyed. He is made irrelevant. He is placed somewhere where his manipulation cannot reach anyone, where his cruelty has no audience, where his power has nothing to act upon. The punishment is not death. The punishment is the absence of everything that makes Cartman feel alive. The absence of victims, the absence of spectators, the absence of the social fabric against which his personality defines itself. The symbolism is deliberate and precise. Cartman's power has always derived from other people. He is nothing without an audience. He is nothing without victims. He is nothing without the social context in which his manipulation and his cruelty have meaning. Take away the people, and what remains is just noise. Just a voice screaming into void. Just a performance with no one watching. The dark oblivion dimension is not a punishment in the way that prison is a punishment, or pain is a punishment. It is the removal of the conditions that make Cartman's existence meaningful to him. It is the subtraction of everything he needs to be who he is. And what remains when everything he needs is subtracted is nothing. He is nothing. Without people to hurt, without systems to exploit, without social hierarchies to climb and dominate and control, Eric Cartman does not exist in any way that matters. He is a predator without prey, a performer without an audience, a king without subjects. The episode marks a shift in the show's approach to Cartman's karma. Previous punishments were localized. They occurred within single episodes and resolved within single episodes. They had clear beginnings and clear endings. Banishment to a dark dimension is different. It is mythological. It is the kind of punishment that stories reserve for fallen angels and exiled gods, for Prometheus chained to his rock, for Satan cast out of heaven. The show has graduated Cartman from a misbehaving child receiving timeouts to something more archetypal, a force of nature that must be contained, an entity whose transgressions have reached a scale that requires cosmic response. He summoned an elder god, so he was banished to oblivion. The punishment matches the crime not just in its content, but in its register. You do not give a timeout to someone who allies with Cthulhu. You cast them out of reality entirely. The episode also functions as a commentary on the specific kind of power that Cartman represents and the specific kind of response that such power demands. Throughout the series, Cartman's power has always been disproportionate to his position. He is a child. He has no authority, no resources, no institutional backing. And yet he consistently achieves outcomes that should be impossible for someone with his formal position in any hierarchy. He does this through force of personality, through willingness to escalate through the exploitation of other people's decency and restraint. His power is the power of someone who will go further than anyone else is willing to go. And for years, this was sufficient. No one matched his escalation. No one was willing to be as extreme as he was. He won by default because winning only requires being the last person standing. And he was always the last person standing because he was always willing to take one more step in a territory where no one else would follow. The Cthulhu Alliance represents the ultimate expression of this strategy. He has escalated all the way to cosmic horror. He has taken his willingness to go further and pushed it to its absolute mathematical limit. There is nowhere further to go. And the response of his peers, the response of banishment to oblivion, is the only proportional answer to someone who has climbed to the top of the escalation ladder and is now looking down at everyone else from a height that makes meaningful resistance impossible. You cannot argue with someone who has an elder god. You cannot outfight them. You cannot outmaneuver them within the system they have established. You can only remove them from the system entirely. You can only say, "You have gone so far that there is no place for you here anymore. We are not going to match you. We are not going to fight you on your terms. We are simply going to put you somewhere where your terms do not apply." There is something worth noting about the other children's emotional state during this banishment. They are not gleeful. They are not celebrating. They are not experiencing the kind of triumphant satisfaction that usually accompanies the defeat of a villain in a narrative. They are tired. They are relieved. They are doing what needs to be done with the weary efficiency of people who have been dealing with this problem for too long and have finally found a solution that works. This emotional tone is important because it reflects the reality of how people actually feel when they finally cut ties with a toxic person. It is not dramatic. It is not cathartic in the way movies suggest it should be. It is just exhaustion meeting resolution. It is just the quiet understanding that this had to happen, and the even quieter relief that it finally did. The Dark Oblivion dimension functions as a narrative reset for Cartman's power level. After allying with Cthulhu, after commanding cosmic forces, after escalating to the absolute maximum possible level of aggression, he needs to be returned to zero. The dimension accomplishes this by stripping away everything. His ally, his power, his audience. His social context, he enters the dimension as someone who commands an elder god. He exits as someone who commands nothing. The reset is total. It is necessary because without it, the character becomes narratively unmanageable. If Cartman retains access to cosmic power, future episodes cannot function normally. The banishment serves both the karmic and the structural needs of the series simultaneously. But he returns. Of course he returns. He always returns, and he returns unchanged. This is perhaps the most important element of the entire episode's contribution to the larger pattern. Banishment to a dark dimension, isolation from all human contact, the complete removal of his power and his audience and his social context. None of it teaches him anything. None of it produces growth or reflection or self-awareness. He comes back exactly as he left. Already scheming, already manipulating, already looking for the next angle, the next exploit, the next opportunity to dominate. The punishment was total, and the lesson learned was zero. The gap between the severity of the consequence and the magnitude of the change it produces is the gap that defines Cartman's entire existence. Maximum consequence, minimum growth, always, without exception, forever. This gap is what makes the post-COVID special feel inevitable rather than surprising. By the time you have watched 14 seasons of this pattern, by the time you have seen consequence delivered and ignored 100 times, the question is no longer whether Cartman will end up alone and miserable. The question is only how alone and how miserable. The answer the special provides is completely alone and completely miserable, which is to say, exactly as alone and miserable as a person who never learns anything from any experience they have ever had deserves to be after 60 years of not learning. This is, in a sense, what society does with people whose behavior exceeds the boundaries that social systems are designed to contain. It removes them, not through violence necessarily, sometimes through exile, sometimes through ostracism, sometimes simply through the collective decision of everyone in a community that this person has gone too far and can no longer be accommodated. The Dark Oblivion dimension is a physical metaphor for social exile, for the moment when a community looks at one of its members and says, unanimously, "We are done. You have exhausted our patience. You have exceeded our capacity to tolerate you, and so you are gone. Not punished, just gone." The 10th and final instance is also the most devastating, not because it is the most dramatic, but because it is the most quiet. The earlier moments of karma were loud. They involved elder gods and physical beatings and psychological breakdowns and millions of dollars lost and public humiliations visible to entire communities. This final moment is none of those things. It is small. It is ordinary. It is the kind of punishment that does not announce itself because it does not need to. It simply is. The moment comes from a streaming special that premiered on Paramount Plus on December 16th, 2021. South Park. Post-COVID, The return of COVID takes place in a future timeline, a projection of what becomes of the characters when they are no longer children, when the buffer of youth has been removed and the consequences of who they became have had decades to accumulate. Stan is a middle-aged man struggling with the gap between who he wanted to be and who he became. Kyle is frustrated by a world that refused to improve at the pace his idealism demanded. Kenny achieved something extraordinary in his field, and then died, as Kenny always does, but this time in service of something that mattered. The future is complicated for all of them. Adulthood did not deliver what childhood promised. But Cartman, the future the show constructs for Eric Cartman, is the most comprehensive, the most precise, and the most thematically perfect act of karmic justice in the entire 25-year history of the series. In the revised timeline that the special ultimately presents as its conclusion, Cartman is homeless. He lives on the street. He drinks. He is bitter in the way that only someone who believes the world owes them something can be bitter when the world delivers nothing. He has no possessions of significance. He has no career. He has no family that acknowledges him. He has no friends. He has nothing. The image of Cartman as a homeless adult is designed to produce a very specific emotional effect in the viewer. It is designed to produce not sympathy, but recognition. The audience has spent 25 years watching the behavior that led to this outcome. They have seen every betrayal, they have seen every manipulation, they have seen every moment where someone extended their hand to Cartman and he bit it. They know, with the absolute certainty that only decades of observation can provide, that this outcome was earned. Every single day of his adult misery was purchased by a specific choice made earlier in his life. There is no injustice here. There is no tragedy in the classical sense. There is only causation. Clear, traceable, undeniable causation stretching from childhood to middle age like a road that only goes one direction. This is not a temporary setback. This is not a low point from which recovery is possible. This is his life. This is the shape that decades of cruelty have carved out for him. Every relationship he ever had has ended. Not in drama, not in explosive confrontation, just in the quiet, gradual way that relationships end when one party consistently takes and never gives, consistently betrays and never honors, consistently exploits and never reciprocates. People did not leave Cartman in a dramatic moment of severance. They simply stopped calling, they stopped including him, they stopped thinking about him. They moved forward with their lives, and their lives moved away from him. And eventually, the distance became permanent because there was nothing pulling him back toward them. No shared affection, no accumulated goodwill, no reservoir of positive memories to draw on when the connection frayed. Everyone he ever knew has severed all ties. Stan does not take his calls. Kyle does not think about him. The boys he spent his childhood with, the boys who tolerated him and included him and gave him chance after chance after chance for years and years and years, have concluded individually and without coordinating that their lives are better without Eric Cartman in them. And they are right. Their lives are better. The removal of Cartman from their social circle is presented not as a loss to be mourned, but as a relief so profound that it barely registers anymore. They are not angry at him. They are not bitter toward him. They simply do not care. And this, the total absence of feeling where there used to be at least annoyance, is the most devastating punishment the show can deliver. He is not important enough to hate. The specific detail that makes this karma resonate with the force it deserves is the comparison to Kenny McCormick. Throughout the entire series, Kenny was the poorest character. His family was the worst-off family in South Park. His house was barely standing. His parents drank. His winter coat was the same orange parka he had worn since childhood, because new clothes were not something his family could afford. Cartman mocked this poverty relentlessly. He used Kenny's financial status as ammunition in every argument. He treated Kenny's lack of money as evidence of Kenny's lack of worth. He built jokes and insults and entire social dynamics around the premise that Kenny was beneath him because Kenny had less. And now Cartman has less than Kenny ever did. He has less than the poorest family in South Park. He has less than the person he spent 25 years mocking for having nothing. The precision of this is devastating. The show did not make Cartman middle class. It did not make him merely struggling. It made him poorer than Kenny, specifically poorer than Kenny. The writers chose that threshold deliberately because they understood what it meant in the context of the entire series. Every joke Cartman ever told about Kenny's poverty now applies to himself. Every insult about worn clothes and broken houses and parents who could not provide, every moment of superiority he felt because his bank account was larger than Kenny's, all of it has reversed. All of it has flowed back to him. All the cruelty about poverty has become a mirror, and the face in the mirror is his own. The special does not present this as funny. It does not frame Cartman's destitution as a punchline or a gag or a momentary situation that will be resolved before the credits roll. It frames it as the logical, inevitable, mathematically certain outcome of a life lived the way Cartman lived his. You cannot treat every person you meet as a resource to be exploited and expect those people to still be there when you need them. You cannot betray every trust and expect trust to be extended to you in return. You cannot take without giving for decades and expect the account not to eventually reach zero. The math is simple. The math was always simple. Addition and subtraction, deposits and withdrawals. A lifetime of withdrawals from accounts he never deposited into. The relationships were bank accounts, and he never put anything in, and he kept taking things out, and eventually the accounts closed. The only question was how long the bill would take to arrive, and the answer turned out to be about 25 years. What the special argues, implicitly but powerfully, is that karma is not always immediate and not always dramatic. Sometimes karma is just time. Sometimes karma is just the long, slow, patient accumulation of consequences that have no individual drama, but whose sum total is devastating. No single act of Cartman's cruelty, taken alone, would justify the misery of his adult life. But they are not taken alone. They are taken together, thousands of them, across decades. Each one small enough to be forgiven individually, each one adding a grain to the pile that eventually buries him. He did not commit one great crime. He committed 10,000 small ones. And the punishment for 10,000 small crimes, delivered all at once at the end of a life, looks exactly like what the special shows us. Not prison, not violence, just isolation, just poverty, just the quiet, grinding, undramatic consequence of being terrible to everyone you know for your entire life, without ever once stopping to wonder what the bill will look like when it finally arrives. The post-COVID special also forces a confrontation with the question of redemption and whether it was ever available to Cartman. The answer the show provides is unambiguous. Redemption was available to him at every single moment of his life. Every day presented an opportunity to make a different choice. Every interaction with another person was a chance to be kind rather than cruel, to give rather than take, to build rather than destroy. He had unlimited opportunities for redemption, an infinite number of them stretching across decades, and he declined every single one, not because redemption was too hard, not because the world would not let him change, but because changing would require acknowledging that his previous behavior was wrong, and his ego would not permit that acknowledgement. Changing would require humility. It would require the admission that he had been wrong about something, about many things, about perhaps everything. And Eric Cartman's psychology is built at its deepest structural level on the absolute impossibility of ever being wrong. So the future the special shows is not a punishment imposed by the universe on someone who tried and failed to be good. It is the natural endpoint of someone who never tried at all. Someone who was offered grace 1,000 times and declined it 1,000 times. Someone who watched his own life narrow and narrow and narrow, watched friends leave and opportunities close and warmth recede, and at no point stopped to ask what he might be doing to cause this narrowing. Because asking would mean admitting that he might be the problem, and he cannot admit that. He will never admit that. He will go to his grave believing that the world was unfair to him, that the people who left were the ones who failed. He will construct elaborate narratives about how he was abandoned by people who owed him loyalty. He will tell himself stories about friends who betrayed him rather than friends he drove away. He will rewrite the history of every relationship exactly the way he rewrote the history of the fish sticks joke, placing himself at the center as the wronged party, removing his own agency from the story of his own isolation. And those stories will feel true to him. They will feel as real as any genuine memory, because his brain has been practicing this revision for his entire life, and it has become very, very good at it. His delusion is permanent. It will protect him from self-knowledge until his last breath. And in protecting him from self-knowledge, it will guarantee that nothing ever changes, that no lesson is ever learned, that the spiral continues downward without interruption, until it reaches its final, inevitable, lonely conclusion. The writers could have made different choices. They could have shown him as a successful con artist, wealthy through exploitation, alone but comfortable. They could have put him in prison, punished by institutions. They could have killed him, which would have been dramatic, but would have let him off easy. Instead, they chose the cruelest option. They chose irrelevance. They chose the mundane. They chose to show that the universe does not need to punish Eric Cartman with lightning bolts or cosmic judgment. The universe simply needs to let time pass. Time does the work. Time compounds the consequences. Time turns small cruelties into large isolation. Time gives people the distance they need to realize they are better off without him. Time is patient and thorough and absolutely inescapable. and it is delivered to Eric Cartman exactly what he earned. A life that looks like what he built. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing. What connects all 10 of these moments is not their severity or their comedy or their dramatic function within individual episodes. What connects them is their precision. Each punishment mirrors the specific crime that precedes it with a structural fidelity that suggests not random cruelty from indifferent writers, but deliberate architecture from writers who understand that karma is most satisfying when it is most poetic. Cartman buys a park for himself alone and loses it because solitude has costs he refused to acknowledge. He disguises himself as a robot to steal secrets and has his own secret exposed to everyone he knows. He pretends to be disabled to win easy prizes and finishes last in every event because his assumption of superiority was the real disability. He preaches hatred against a group and is made to experience membership in that group, and then exposed as a fraud to both sides. He behaves like an animal that cannot be reached by human methods, and is trained like one. He fakes a condition to achieve freedom from self-censorship and genuinely loses the ability to censor himself. He mocks a girl, and that girl beats him in front of everyone who was ever afraid of him. He steals credit for creativity and loses his ability to perceive what actually happened. He summons an elder god against his friends and is banished to oblivion by those friends. He gives nothing to anyone for 25 years and ends up with nothing. The pattern is architecture. It is engineering. It is the product of writers who understand that the most devastating form of consequence is the form that grows organically from the transgression rather than being imposed upon it from outside. Cartman is not punished by judges or juries or divine beings dispensing justice from a position of authority. He is punished by his own choices playing out to their logical conclusions. He is punished by consequence, and consequence is the one adversary in his life that cannot be manipulated. Every other adversary can be gamed. Kyle can be provoked into making mistakes. Stan can be worn down through persistence. Teachers can be confused through lies. Parents can be guilted into compliance. But consequence operates on a different plane entirely. Consequence does not hear his words. Consequence does not respond to his tears. Consequence does not have emotions that can be exploited, or insecurities that can be targeted, or buttons that can be pushed. You cannot charm consequence. You cannot threaten consequence, or bribe consequence, or make consequence feel sorry for you. You cannot find consequence's personal vulnerability and exploit it until consequence breaks down and lets you off the hook. Consequence does not negotiate. Consequence does not have feelings. Consequence simply arrives wearing the exact shape of whatever you did to summon it, and it stays for exactly as long as you deserve. Return one final time to the scene that opened this examination. Cesar Millan in a suburban living room, a child sitting quietly on the floor, a mother weeping in a doorway. The scene is absurd. It is comedy. It is a dog trainer treating a child like a dog and the child responding exactly the way a well-trained dog would respond. But underneath the absurdity, the scene is something else. It is a window into possibility. It is the show asking a question that it has been asking in different forms for 25 years. What if Cartman stopped? Not was forced to stop by external intervention. What if he chose to stop? What if he looked at the pattern, at the karma, at the endless cycle of cruelty and consequence that defines his existence, and simply decided to step out of it? The answer, demonstrated by the Psst episode and confirmed by every episode that follows it, is that he could. He could stop at any time. The cycle is not mandatory. The suffering is not inevitable. He is not the victim of forces beyond his control. He is the author of his own punishment, writing new chapters every day, refusing to put the pen down even though the story it tells is one of uninterrupted loss. He could be happy. The show proved it in that one episode. He could be at peace. He could have friends who actually like him and a mother who is not afraid of him. He simply has to stop doing the things that make those outcomes impossible. He could wake up tomorrow and make a different choice. He could decide once, just once, to not exploit someone's trust, to not steal someone's credit, to not weaponize someone's vulnerability. He could let a single opportunity for cruelty pass unused and see what happens. See how it feels to leave a weapon on the table. See what the world looks like from the perspective of someone who is not constantly at war with everyone in it. You will not stop. The show will not let him stop. The narrative requires his continuation exactly as he is, but the fact that stopping was always available, always possible, always within reach if only he would extend his hand toward it instead of forming it into a fist, gives every karma moment documented here its ultimate weight. The show cannot let him stop because the show needs the cycle to continue. But the fact that he could, the fact that normalcy was available to him and he turned away from it, gives every subsequent moment of karma an additional weight. It transforms his suffering from something imposed upon him to something chosen by him. And choices, unlike circumstances, carry moral weight. Circumstances can be pitied. Choices can only be evaluated. Cartman's choice, made again and again across a quarter century, is to prioritize his need to dominate over his opportunity to connect. And the evaluation of that choice, delivered by consequence over and over and over across hundreds of episodes, is always the same. The choice is wrong. The choice leads to loss. The choice leads to isolation. The choice leads ultimately to a man on a street corner with nothing because he spent a lifetime making exactly this choice. And this is exactly where this choice leads. There is something about that consistency, something about the absolute reliability of it, that feels less like entertainment and more like education. If you have watched this show from the beginning, from August of 1997 to the present, you have witnessed one of the longest-running demonstrations of cause and effect in narrative history. You have watched a single character make the same mistake hundreds of times and face the consequences hundreds of times and refuse to learn hundreds of times. And you, watching from outside the cycle, have learned what he refuses to learn. That cruelty has a cost, that selfishness is self-defeating, that the bill always arrives, that nothing you take from others stays with you, and everything you give to others comes back eventually. These are not complicated lessons, they are the simplest lessons storytelling can teach. But they have been taught here with more patience and more consistency and more creative variation than perhaps anywhere else in the history of the medium. And perhaps that is the final and most important observation to make about the karma of Eric Cartman. It is not just his punishment, it is our education. We, the audience, are the students in a classroom where the lesson has been running continuously for a quarter century. The lesson is simple, and the lesson is obvious, and the lesson never changes. Selfishness destroys the selfish. Cruelty consumes the cruel. The bill always comes due. These are truths so basic that children understand them. So fundamental that every culture has proverbs expressing them, so ancient that they appear in the earliest surviving human stories. But knowing something is true and feeling something is true are different things. And what South Park has done, across 25 years and hundreds of episodes and 10 specific moments of karma documented here tonight, is make you feel it. Not just know it intellectually. Feel it in your body. Feel the satisfaction when the park is seized. Feel the relief when Wendy's fist connects. Feel the quiet devastation of a man alone on a curb with nothing. The show has made the lesson visceral. It has made consequence something you can taste. And maybe that is enough. Maybe that is what stories are for. Not to tell you things you do not already know, but to make you feel things you already know in ways that make the knowing deeper, more real, more embedded in your understanding of how the world works. Cartman does not learn. That is established beyond doubt. But you might. And that possibility, the possibility that the audience learns what the character refuses to, is what makes the entire 25-year exercise worthwhile. Not as a single transformative revelation, not as a moment of epiphany delivered by a single brilliant episode, but as the slow, steady accumulation of understanding that comes from watching the same pattern play out across a span of time long enough to constitute a significant portion of your actual life. You have watched Cartman fail for decades. You have watched consequence arrive for decades. You have internalized, through sheer repetition and through the satisfaction that repetition generates, the fundamental truth that selfishness is ultimately self-defeating and cruelty eventually finds its way home. Not as entertainment alone, though it is certainly that, but as something approaching wisdom, delivered in the most unlikely package imaginable. A crude, profane, deliberately offensive animated comedy about children in a small Colorado mountain town. Consider how unusual this is. Consider how few shows have maintained a single thematic argument for this long without abandoning it or contradicting it or softening it for commercial reasons. 25 years of saying the same thing, actions have consequences. 25 years of demonstrating it, 25 years of proving it through one character's repeated failure to learn it. The commitment to that single idea, expressed through hundreds of different scenarios and dozens of different mechanisms, but always arriving at the same fundamental conclusion, is extraordinary in the history of serialized storytelling. Most shows change their minds. Most shows soften with time. Most shows decide eventually that their villains deserve redemption, that their difficult characters deserve growth, that the audience needs closure in the form of transformation. South Park refuses. It holds its position. Cartman does not change. The karma does not stop. The lesson does not waver. And the audience, sitting with that consistency week after week and year after year and decade after decade, absorbs it at a depth that no single episode or single season could achieve. The repetition itself becomes the teacher. The pattern itself becomes the lesson. The consistency itself maintained across a quarter century without a single deviation, becomes the proof. That is the story of Eric Cartman, and the karma that finds him decade after decade informs as creative as his cruelty and as reliable as his refusal to change. 10 moments, 10 mirrors held up to 10 transgressions, 10 demonstrations that the universe keeps accounts and that the accounts always balance, eventually, in their own time, in their own way. If you enjoyed this video essay, hitting subscribe means the world. Sleep well. I will see you next time.